Welcome to Wharton Tech Talks, everybody. This is your host, Sophie. Hosting with me today is my lovely co host, Chris. Chris, say hello to our listeners.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking all things data and specifically data analytics and data science at everybody's favorite food delivery app, DoorDash. We're excited to be joined by fellow Wharton MBA alum, Jess Lachs. Jess Lachs is Vice President of Analytics and Data Science at DoorDash. In her role, she oversees a team of 150 people across the country that use data to solve business problems, covering business and product analytics, data science, experimentation, data, and performance management. Prior to this position, Jess held the role of first general manager at DoorDash, responsible for launching new DoorDash cities like Los Angeles and Boston, combining marketing creativity, analytics, and hustle to operationalize each new city. Jess began her career in investment banking at Lehman Brothers and in business school founded her own company, Gift Simple, a social gifting startup, which caught the attention of DoorDash CEO Tony Chu through an investor. From there, he hired her as one of DoorDash's first employees. She's a graduate of Cornell University, and as I previously mentioned, she holds an MBA from Wharton with a concentration in entrepreneurship and strategic management. She's a big Yankees fan and currently resides in Austin, Texas. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to jump into your really interesting career trajectory and learn more about what's going on in terms of data science at DoorDash.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to talk to both of you and share some of the things I've learned in my 7 years at DoorDash.
Awesome. And we're going to kick things off starting on your specialty, which is data science and analytics. So I think what's really interesting about DoorDash is it seems to be a very data-driven company. And what's unique about it is that everything takes place in one application. So if we look at some other apps, like popular D2C apps on the market right now, like some of the social media apps, they're now trying to integrate, e-commerce and all these other platforms to make their app more holistic so they can capture all of that data behind the scenes on what the customer is searching for and using their application. But within DoorDash, you can actually track all of that from searching and selecting food to checking out within the app. So you have all of this path data, logistics data, and dispatch data, which is really interesting and probably feeds into how data-driven the company is. So has this always been the case? And if so, how do you feel like this has impacted the business model or the way that the company operates and approaches decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the data is our competitive advantage, and I think that we have prioritized data from the very early days of DoorDash. One of the things that we do is bring all of our data, whether it's from the consumer app or the Dasher app or the merchant tablet or the Caviar app, and bring it all into one place, a single source of truth to be able to establish key metrics, to make sure that everyone is measuring things the same way, and to make sure that all of our data is accessible for analysis, for reporting. And so it's been a deliberate choice to bring all of sort of disparate data sources from all of the apps, as well as some of the third-party data that we use and our CRM systems, all into a data lake that we can access so that data scientists, engineers, operators, whomever is trying to access that information to run the business has everything in one place, nicely tied together, so that we really do get a full picture of the platform in sort of one place.
That really sounds amazing. I feel like, working at various companies that kind of, coin themselves as data-driven, many times you kind of run into silos, access issues, you have a project and it gets lagged behind because you need approval. So it sounds wonderful to have this data lake with just wonderful amounts of data to kind of give people and empower them to make data-driven decisions at DoorDash.
It really is. I think it's something that I would recommend to everyone out there who's starting companies trying to think about their data infrastructure. Having a central data team and a central analytics team, I think has helped to facilitate that because they're, across the different areas of our business, whether it's the consumer app or the Dasher app, we're all one team. And so data is coming from one place and we can think about it more holistically than maybe other companies who may have more silos or different data teams that live in different parts of the organization. So it's something I believe is the right decision for us, of course, to have this central organization with a central leader being me, who can make sure that all of our data ends up in one place. And it was something that was really important when we acquired Caviar, to make sure that that was true with post acquisition, that we were able to bring that data into the same tools, systems that we have, and tie the consumer data and the Dasher data together so that we could understand engagement across both platforms.
Super cool. And I think it's almost like data overload. You have all this data, now you have it all in one place. It's a three-sided marketplace. So you have customer data, you have Dasher data, you have restaurant data. Like, how do you go about tackling that and analyzing it into something that is actionable? So whether it's a data-driven decision or a strategy, like, how do you make sense of all of this data?
Yeah, I think it's important to focus on impact. So we want to use data to make business decisions more quickly and hopefully more accurately by using data. And so we use data as a tool to help us understand key relationships, to create new metrics that we think will better measure business performance, and to evaluate trade-offs between different initiatives. And so I think it's less about sort of diving into the data lake to make fun pun, but it's less about diving into just kind of see what happens. There's always exploratory analysis, and we do want to carve out time for that type of work. But a lot of what we do is trying to determine where the opportunities are for product development, for building new services for merchants, and using the data we have to identify these opportunities, to make recommendations for what we should build, and then for measuring the impact of the decisions we make and the products we ship. And so that's really what we're using data for, I'd say, the most. But it's always good to have it, because one of the things I've always said is, data storage is relatively inexpensive. Get it, store it. You can always go back and use it. And if you're building a model and you want historical data, if you want to evaluate trends and seasonality, having that data, even if you don't have a use for it today, tomorrow you might. And so it's really important to get everything you can and to store it, because you might need it. And once, if it's not there, you can't go back in time and recreate it. So having it is always a nice thing when you need it.
Definitely. And then, trends and seasonality, that brings up a good point. Like, with everything that's been going on, and food delivery has obviously become very popular over the past year because a lot of restaurants have been closed down. Like, what have you seen, I guess, changes within the data in terms of like customer preferences, and what do you feel like it's told you about the restaurant industry as a whole? Like, do you feel like the data has kind of revealed like these really like popular trends or preferences, and like the restaurant industry or like this delivery industry is like ripe for disruption?
COVID was difficult for many reasons, and for sort of everyone for different reasons. I think for us, the pandemic accelerated the business in a way where we sort of pulled the future forward. We had started to launch certain new categories, and with markets shutting down, those plans were all accelerated, and adoption was also accelerated. And so I think for us, it was about figuring out how we could help merchants to stay in business. I was really excited when we did an analysis and found that the odds of staying open for merchants during the pandemic was 8 times as great on DoorDash. And that's, doing what we can to help merchants through the pandemic to make sure that we're sending orders for both delivery orders as well as pickup orders was really important, but also expanding into new categories, convenience and grocery, so that we could deliver milk and toilet paper and help consumers get the things that they need from their local communities while in lockdown was really important. And I think from a data perspective, COVID was difficult because while it wasn't exactly a black swan event, it was not something we had seen in any of our historical data. And when predicting and forecasting our business, it was really challenging to understand the impact of shutdowns and reopening on the business. And so one of the teams that I lead is our BizOps team, and they work to understand what's happening day to day and forecast the business. And that was really challenging. We were doing our best to forecast the future and modeling out what reopening might mean for different parts of the business, looking at publicly available data like reopen rates and in-store reservation data to understand those relationships so that we could extrapolate them forward and set some bound, a lower bound and an upper bound for what we would expect the business to do. So it was definitely a challenge, although from a data science perspective, I think it was a fun challenge. Probably not what merchants and consumers and dashers might say about COVID, but from a data perspective, it was an exciting challenge for us to have to get creative, and the team did a phenomenal job just kind of rolling with the punches and getting creative to get answers for our leadership.
Definitely. And I know you mentioned that you like DoorDash because it feels like this like massive optimization problem that you have to go in and solve. And when we look at DoorDash, it's a three-sided market and it depends on-demand logistics. And you just touched on some of this, but would love to dive a little deeper and understand like what are the big pieces of the puzzle that you have to solve when you look at the DoorDash ecosystem? Because it sounds like there's so many moving pieces with the on-demand logistics and the delivery, because once you place the order, you have to make sure that you look at the dasher end and the restaurant and they're picking up the food on time and it's hot, and you have to account for traffic and can they park and all of these other different factors. So it seems like it is a really big optimization problem, but how do you go about tackling that, and how do you figure out what you should prioritize when there's so many different players and pieces?
Yeah, so it's funny as you're describing that, I'm getting more and more excited because it's just a wealth of complicated problems that we get to try and solve every day. I think, you know, the with a three-sided marketplace, it's important to align incentives, but as you mentioned, there's also a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong. So you need to have really good, um, sort of catching mechanisms for understanding issues in the system and pivoting to address those issues so that ultimately the experience for consumers, dashers, and merchants is a good experience. And when we think about the marketplace, I mentioned it's critical to align incentives, and that's because the marketplace doesn't work if one side of the marketplace isn't happy, isn't getting what they need. So consumers want the convenience, they want the food or the retail item or the milk, that they want. Merchants, of course, are trying to get access to new consumers, are trying to increase sales, and dashers are trying to earn. And so if we make a change or do something that takes this balance out of alignment, the marketplace doesn't work. And so we look for opportunities, whether that's new product features, new services that will better align incentives. So for example, if you think about POS integration, that's a situation where it's a win-win for several audiences. Merchants love POS integration because they can receive orders through the process that they're using on a day-to-day basis. There's no new training that has to happen, and it just fits into the flow of their normal operations. Dashers like POS integration because it makes the fulfillment easier. There's less likely to be an error, and they, walk into a merchant, hopefully can pick up their order right away, especially if it gets sent right when they are nearing the restaurant. And so it's a smoother pickup, which means more deliveries, more earning opportunities. And of course, consumers like it because they can get their food faster and there's less mistakes. And of course, DoorDash likes it because less mistakes means less refunds, less credits, less issues, and happier audiences. So
Yep.
those are the type of opportunities that we look for. Now that one's a win-win-win-win, across the board. But we like to look for opportunities where more than one audience is benefiting, and definitely we want to avoid opportunities where an audience is going to sort of be penalized in any way. And so for us, identifying those opportunities, building, shipping those products and services, and then measuring the impact to make sure it's having the desired effect is a core part of how we develop products at DoorDash. And so that's definitely one way that the marketplace affects our day-to-day. And I'd say the other is just the complexity that it brings. So you brought this up with sort of prep times and parking, and the way that we run our business and the way that we run our experiments are often impacted by our marketplace. And so there is an example that I had shared in a blog post about our SOS pricing, which is a version of our surge pricing, where network effects rendered the A/B test we were running to be inaccurate. And this was early on when we at the time, didn't realize the effect of this network on the way that we would measure experiments. And so we dug into the results to understand what was happening, and we identified the network effects that were preventing us from establishing independence between our two groups, and ultimately needed to run a switchback test. So we needed to develop our experimentation methodology in order to accurately measure our business. And I think that that's something that other businesses, especially sort of consumer apps or B2B apps, don't have to necessarily worry about. But that marketplace complexity just comes back to make things fun and challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I love the holistic approach of thinking about, how do you help, like, how does a new feature or product or, decision kind of positively affect all kind of, three folks in the market place. And, the kind of test that you need to do, especially when you have, seasonality, and not even just like, I don't know, it's summer and people are maybe, getting lighter food, but like, Super Bowl or, huge events, or just things that are happening on social media where, something blows up that's really funny and people are getting together and ordering takeout. And you see a huge surge that can be, hard to kind of model and emulate in data at times. But, thinking a little bit more about the marketplace, I'm curious, like, when you're thinking about merchants and like, new features or new ways to kind of help them think about expanding their consumer base, maybe helping them with data that, say a small mom and pop shop wouldn't normally have access to. I'm curious, like, I don't know how you think about that strategically, or kind of where you see, inefficiencies in merchants, and how DoorDash is thinking about, making that a little smoother.
Yeah, so I mean, we use data, of course, within DoorDash, but one of the things that I love is we have a team that works with our merchant partners to provide data to merchants, whether that's enterprise merchants, chains, merchants with a very large footprint across the U.S. or the globe, or the pie shop on the corner that wants to understand performance. And so we were able to share data and insights with all of our merchants. And that ranges from basic reporting about their transactions for accounting and reconciliation, to insights about most popular items, and error rates. So that's a big one. When we look at why a consumer may or may not reorder from a merchant, obviously food quality is incredibly important, but so is error rates, missing items or incorrect items. And so surfacing this information early to merchants can provide a really beneficial feedback loop, so that merchants can ensure that their menus are up to date and accurate, that the staff is adequately trained for the special instructions that consumers may have, and also to potentially change the options that are offered with certain items, right? If you start to see a lot of people asking for no cheese, right, maybe that should be something that is added to the menu as an option. And we have seen number of options and edits and add-ons increase over the years because people want food the way they want it. People have dietary restrictions, and it's so important to ensure that consumers are able to get the food that they want because that's what keeps consumers coming back to the platform and to the merchant. And so I think being able to surface that information to merchants and providing merchants with a direct connection with consumers to be able to respond to feedback and comments is something that we recently rolled out in many locations where merchants can communicate directly with consumers to understand this feedback and to respond to feedback. And so I think that we want to use data to improve all sides of our marketplace. And if we can get information from consumers and dashers and share that with merchants, help merchants to update their menus, update prices to be competitive with sort of similar merchants, all of these types of insights are really valuable for merchants to be able to grow their sales and grow their customer base. And that's ultimately what we want to help merchants on the platform to do.
Really interesting. And previously you had talked about experimentation. I feel like in a lot of our classes here, we've been talking about how important experimentation is, like A/B testing and testing different features or promotions when you're either testing a market, testing a new feature, or trying to expand. So like how important is data and experimentation, and we think about these partnerships that you're creating with restaurants and the feedback loop, like do they ever come to you and ask, hey, can we run some sort of experiment on a new food item or a new feature in the app, and you test it out that way? Like I'm assuming there's experimentation in any aspect of this three-sided market, so you could test it with the customers, but you can also test it with these restaurants.
Absolutely. At DoorDash, we have a test and learn culture. So we try and measure everything. And experimentation is one of the ways that we do this. I think we're running more than 200 experiments every day to quantify all aspects of our
Wow.
business. So we're measuring the impact of product features that we're shipping. We're measuring the performance of machine learning algorithms. And we're quantifying business levers, things like retention drivers and price elasticity. And we do that. We have our own proprietary experimentation platform that we've been developing over the years that facilitate our ability to run A/B tests, switchback tests, many different types of experiments depending on the need at the time. But we also do run operational tests and use quasi-experimental methods when experimentation is not possible. And we do work directly with merchant partners to run experiments. And some of the concepts that have recently been launched in terms of virtual brands in partnership with merchants to try out a new food concept, right, have come about from these types of insights and are a really great way to identify if there are new types of cuisines or new types of food items that merchants should be investing in, whether or not it's on their existing menu or a whole new concept. And that type of innovation and partnership with merchants to ultimately expand their reach is something that's really exciting. Something that if you had asked me 7 years ago, I would have never thought would be, something I get to work on every day. But it's really exciting to get to, partner with merchants, with brands to expand and improve their business. And so experimentation is absolutely a critical part of our measurement strategy and something that we spend a lot of time both working on and trying to improve and expand our experimentation platform for sure.
Yeah, I think that's super exciting, especially like the new concepts. I'm a big foodie, so it's really exciting to hear like new types of food being tested out that maybe I haven't seen before. And I think it's really interesting, right, with the concept or kind of the rise of ghost kitchens, with bigger, say, organizations who want to try something out, but maybe are a little reticent to put it in like with their typical brand. And now they have this opportunity, in DoorDash to have a nice page. And have high quality food that they can test out and see if it really resonates with consumers. I kind of on that, I guess, innovation in terms of food, I'm curious, where you might think like, I don't know, whether it's ghost kitchens or, maybe trends you've been seeing in kind of the evolution of food on the platform. and I guess like what you might think is next in terms of, I guess, maybe cuisine or opportunities there.
Oh, that's a great question. So we run a report sort of twice a year where we talk about food trends. And so um, I'm trying to I don't remember the insights from the last one. I think we have a new one that'll be coming out relatively soon. But I think there's a lot that stays the same, and yet there's a lot that changes. And I think that we've seen certain cuisines just deliver well, and are always going to be popular. People love, they love chicken wings, the Mexican food, Chinese food. I think they're sort of the staples, and then there are things that come in and out of fashion. I know that there was a big rise in kale at one point, and acai bowls and cauliflower, I think, was something that came up in the last food trends. I think the exciting thing is that with the platform, we're able to showcase whatever food trends are happening, uh, in the world at large. We're able to really quickly add those new items or new concepts onto the platform. And part of what we're doing is trying to streamline everything from merchant onboarding to menu adjustments through product improvement, and reducing friction so that merchants, whether they're a new merchant or an existing merchant, can really easily adjust their footprint on DoorDash for any of these new and changing trends. And I think that that is empowering for merchants to know that should they decide to add a cauliflower crust pizza to their menu of pizzas, it's really easy to quickly update their menu themselves within the merchant portal, or on the tablet, and to be able to provide that immediately to consumers so that they can test interest. They can highlight that item as a featured item within their menus. They can add photos of the item to make sure that consumers see it and see how delicious it looks. And being able to help merchants to grow in that way is something that's really, really exciting, and definitely something that I think will continue to expand, and be more and more important as consumer preferences change and as more and more consumers expect convenience, and fast delivery to their doors.
What's crazy about these trends and preferences is to add on to the complicated logistical and optimization problem, they're probably different from state or area. So when you were launching in, Boston and LA, like did you have to kind of prioritize like the top features or factors or attributes in each state and then kind of like shift the algorithm or the view accordingly based, people in Boston might be ordering a lot of seafood and pizza and people in LA are ordering a lot of kale. Like how do you figure out how to manage these trends between these really different areas, locations, and then preferences?
Yeah, in many ways, that just adds to the complexity of our marketplace, which is unlike other businesses that are at least in national, maybe global marketplace. We are a series of hyper local marketplaces. If
Mm-hmm.
you live in Philadelphia, do you really care that we added a new poke restaurant in Santa Barbara? No, doesn't affect you at all. So the value of our network is truly, um, at the hyper local limit, and so we need to be great everywhere to be great. And I think that it's really important to understand consumer preference differences, dasher preference differences, and uh, merchant selection at the hyper local level. And it's funny because the reason I got into analytics, or I think the instigating kind of event or question was I wanted to understand these differences. And when we launched LA, it was a lot different from Palo Alto and Mountain View. And we were like, okay, well, LA is different. And then we launched Boston, and Boston was different from LA. And we were asking questions, is this good? What does good look like for a launch? How should we measure how well we're doing? Are we getting better at launching markets? How well are we doing in terms of having the right selection on the platform in Boston versus in on the west side of LA, and how, what are the right metrics to measure? How do we forecast these businesses? What matters most to consumers, dashers, and merchants in these areas? And it became apparent that there was no one playbook that would fit all of these geographies. We really needed to have a way to understand the business drivers at the market level. And so that was what I started to work on, because that was really interesting to me. I was asking all these questions and there was no one that could give me the answer. So I was like, all right, I'll try and answer. And that was what started my path towards analytics. It was need based, and because I just ask an insane number of questions and like to know everything. So it's easier to do it yourself if you're going to have all those questions, and you're a know-it-all.
And speaking of like your background and your path to analytics, don't want to go without focusing on your crazy journey going from banking back to B school, starting your own company, to DoorDash, and switching over to analytics. So can you just walk us through like your journey and kind of like the leap of faith that it took to go from banking, which is a male-dominated industry, into another male-dominated industry and completely switching functions and learning new skills? Like, just walk us through that journey and kind of your thought process and maybe some lessons learned.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the most important thing is to be an active participant in your own career and seek out opportunities and challenge yourself. I mean, it's easy to say, but I think when you look back at my career, I can voice over my career in a way that makes it sound so well planned, so well thought out and intentional, but it wasn't, right? I mean, maybe not the fact that Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. I don't think anyone thought that was intentional, but I think, when people look back on their careers, you can put a narrative to it. You can that often may not have existed in the moment, or you may not have recognized in the moment. And I think it's important that everyone feel comfortable taking risk, because it may not work out. And so, case in point, I was working as an investment banker at Lehman Brothers, and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So that didn't work out so great. But I took what I had learned throughout banking, and I've since applied that down the line. And at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that it wasn't banking. And so I went to Wharton thinking that I would figure out what I wanted to do with my life, that there would be some divine intervention while sitting in a class where it was like, I want to be a consultant or something like that. And of course, that did not happen. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I took an entrepreneurship class with Professor Ethan Mollick, because a friend of mine in my cohort encouraged me to do so. And Davis Smith is his name, co-founder of Cotopaxi. And he suggested I take this class and work with him on a business idea that he had. I could write the finance section of the business plan. I was like, all right, that sounds interesting. I was on a big kick where I wanted to try and take classes outside my comfort zone to just see what else was out there. And this was one of those opportunities. And I sat in class, I think it was the first day, and the professor asked how many people wanted to start a company either out of school or at some time in their life. And everyone raises their hand except me. I'm sitting there being like, this is not interesting to me. And, I'm not an entrepreneur. That's those crazy visionary white men like Steve Jobs. Like that's who these entrepreneurs are. That's not me at all. And ultimately, in taking that class and a few others, I started a company at Wharton in business school. And yes, that company did not succeed, right? Another failure. But it was the fact that I had started the company and had shown that I knew what it took to be a founder, to work at at that point, not even, or I wouldn't even call it early stage company, that Tony, our CEO at DoorDash, really appreciated and recognized. And I think that was part of the reason that he hired me to be the first GM at DoorDash, because he saw, sure, she's, a banker and has an MBA. I don't think he was at all impressed with that. What he was impressed with was that I had started a company, because it showed that I had some appetite for risk, that I was willing to roll up my sleeves and do whatever was necessary to to make a company successful. And even though I had not succeeded at that, it showed that I could do it. And so that helped me get the job at DoorDash, I'm sure. And so ultimately, those failures from early in my career were what helped to get me to where I am today. And so I think that it's really important for people to not be afraid of failing, because ultimately those failures propel you to something else or open up another door that may not have been open, introduce you to a person that you might not have met otherwise. And that fundamentally can shape the direction of your career.
That's amazing. I also actually took an entrepreneurship class with Ethan Malik. It was a simulation, and he's just effusive. I feel like he's really inspiring and exciting, and makes something that I feel like is really scary, like entrepreneurship, seem accessible, and like something you can do. You can take concrete steps to kind of test out your idea and kind of bring it to market, even though it's I feel like pretty risky and pretty scary.
It is, but I think it's something that anyone can do. There isn't a certain type of entrepreneur. I think that's a misconception. And I think it's important for people who, of course, want to do that to know that you can look any way you want, you can have any background you want, and you can still be an entrepreneur. And I think that was the major takeaway from that first class, which was just that entrepreneurs aren't a certain type. There's a lot of different kinds of entrepreneurs, and I could be an entrepreneur if I wanted to.
Definitely. And I think there was a quote where you said, hire people willing to roll up their sleeves and do any job. I love that motto because I feel like you really kind of live by that mentality and just like being willing to do anything to get this business up and running. I think that you still do a little bit of dashing, if I'm not mistaken. And is that just like you're still trying to kind of like be on the ground, figure out the business, know what's going on, and be in tuned with like the logistics piece, and that is helping you? Or like kind of what does this like motto and mentality mean to you?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I believe that if you surround yourself with people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do any job, that you can accomplish anything. And so the example that I like to cite is that early days in Boston, we used to spend Saturday nights taking out the trash and breaking down boxes. Like that, many people would not call that a fun Saturday night, but for us, it was something that had to get done, and it was a time when we could all do it together, and it became a bonding experience, and it became a way that we built up our friendship, our the ability to work together. And I think it also highlights just the type of people that work at DoorDash, people who, aren't going to say, oh, that I don't take out the trash, or that's not my job, right? Everything's your job at a startup. And I like to have people on the team who think that everything's their job and who are curious and are going to ask questions, even if it's outside of their specific domain, because great ideas come from lots of places. And if you only ever stay within your swim lane, you lose out on some massive brain power and creativity in the phenomenal people that you've hired because you've restricted them to only looking at one problem space. So I really encourage people to go beyond their jobs, and whether that's from an analysis standpoint, asking questions in different areas, thinking about different parts of the business, or when it comes to actually using the product. So it's important to use the product as a consumer, to file any bugs that you might find, or to submit any issues with the menu when you're using the app. But it's also important to understand the dashing experience. How can you build product for Dashers if you're not a Dasher yourself? And I think even if you're not building product for Dashers, I think it's important to understand the pain points of being on a delivery, of being on a batch delivery, being at a merchant and having to wait. Right, those are the experiences that help you to understand the audiences that you're building products for, that you're analyzing, and can really add something to your analysis, to your ideation, and just overall better understand the business. So yeah, I think, sitting in a merchant kitchen and looking at how the process works, how orders come in, how orders are prepared, where they go, what does that look like? And so I encourage everyone on the team to do that, and that includes me.
I love that. I mean, I think it really helps you kind of build that user empathy and make decisions that are kind of steeped in, improving experiences or just taking them into account when you're making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to talk a little bit more about kind of just the future of on demand. We kind of talked about over the pandemic, DoorDash doing more around kind of like essentials like milk and toilet paper. That horrible run on toilet paper was definitely a problem during COVID. But it's interesting to see as there are more and more delivery companies coming, delivering everything under the sun from medication to food to pantry essentials, and even looking at, companies like Grab in Southeast Asia that, go even beyond delivery and are like, trying to do banking. They do business to business delivery and groceries. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, how you see the evolution of on-demand kind of evolving maybe in the US or, maybe globally, and what that might mean for DoorDash.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Our mission at DoorDash hasn't changed. It's always been to grow and empower local economies. And sure, we started with food, but there are a number of other verticals as well that we've expanded into: grocery, convenience, pets, flowers, and others that you mentioned. And I think, we like to say that we started with the hardest problem, which is food. If we can keep your order of ice cream cold while with your soup hot and get that to you in, say 30 minutes, I think we can deliver a pair of jeans or a bag of dog food just as well. And so sort of by solving the hardest problem, it really does unlock the opportunity to solve, I don't want to say necessarily easier problems, but problems that don't have the same level of complexity. They have other complexity, of course, but that was intentional. And I think for us, we want to continue to expand our fulfillment of delivery and pickup across all of these new categories. And we want to introduce our existing consumer base to these new categories, as well as acquire new consumers who are interested in those categories. And I think, we've grown um, in Q1 orders from non-restaurant categories, so that would include grocery, convenience, alcohol, flowers, and gifting, grew more than 40% since last quarter. And so we see a huge opportunity to expand our reach into these new categories and provide consumers with convenience, not just for food, but for everything that they need from their local communities.
Super interesting. It'll be interesting to see how things play out in the next couple of years, which actually brings us to, unfortunately, our closing question because we are out of time. But we ask this to all of our guests, so we will ask you, what is your boldest, most interesting, or unique prediction of how the world is going to be different 5 to 10 years from now? Like, what do you think or believe in your heart is going to happen, even though to everyone else it might seem like a moonshot?
Wow, that is a phenomenal question. And I'm one of those people who's really great in the short term and being able to tell people how to go from A to B to C. When you start talking about X, Y, and Z, my brain just does not know how to process that information. But I do think that there will be, and may not be controversial, but specific to how consumers consume, I think the nature of our communities and storefronts will be very different. I think that stores are going to be much more experiential, are going to be much more about seeing, touching, tasting, and like all of the senses. And I think that much of our day-to-day purchasing for especially regular items is going to be all at the touch of a button, brought to you immediately. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a further separation between sort of shopping for the experience, making it more of a moment and an occasion, and just getting the thing you need on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly, et cetera. And I think that that is going to continue to diverge. And I think that the nature of how stores are built, what's in them, is fundamentally going to change. And you started to see that with ghost kitchens, changing the nature of restaurants, and things like food trucks and the cupcake ATMs, and like changing ways to get and consume goods. So it may not be that controversial, but that's as far as my brain can go in terms of predicting the future.
Awesome. No, yeah, I agree. I think ordering, delivering, even e-commerce, like everything is trending towards just being more tech enabled. So from like a great eating restaurant experience to just a super fast delivery with great tech. It'll be exciting to see what happens in 5 to 10 years. But thank you so much, Jess. This has been an awesome conversation, and we can't wait to continue following your career and DoorDash.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to speak with both of you today.